Hey, Algebra 1. Today we're going to do 9.5, completing the square. I'm going to teach it from the beginning, just because I feel like my Zoom lesson wasn't the best, and I'd rather start fresh. Um, yeah, so let's just start it off. All right, let's look at this equation first. So this should feel familiar. This should look familiar-ish, and you should kind of remember how to solve it. If you don't remember, I'm about to show you, and at least it should jog your memory. But I have this quadratic equals 0. So I have A is 1, B is 6, C is 5. Since A is 1, I don't have to do no drag and slide and divide. So I want to figure out what multiplies to C that adds to B. So what multiplies to C that adds to B? Well, the only thing that multiplies is 5 and 1. That happens to add to 6. Okay? Now, since 5 and 1 adds to 6, we can rewrite this as x plus 5 and x plus 1 equals 0. All right? So, and then we would solve these separately if you remember. So x plus 5 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. X equals negative 1. X equals negative 5. You subtract 5 on both sides, you subtract 1 on both sides. So what does this mean? That means if I plugged in a negative 5 or a negative 1 into this equation, you should get 0 overall. Okay? So that should feel familiar. That's factoring. Okay? What today we're going to learn is a new way to factor. I'm going to write negative 5 and negative 1 just to remember the answer. Negative 5, negative 1 over here. X equals negative 5, negative 1. So we're going to use completing the square, and I'm going to use this exact thing. Just as before, I'm going to write the steps into the Google Classroom to save you time on the video. And I'm just going to do the example right here. So step 1 is to separate the x's from the constants, or in other words, isolate the x's. Usually the best thing to do is minus 5, minus 5. Some questions, they will give you it where the x's are already isolated, which is nice. So x squared plus 6x equals negative 5. What we're doing right now is solving this using completing the square. You would be right, it said, but factoring feels like it's a little bit easier. I'm just using this one as an example because we kind of already know the answers, and we're going to check the answers. All right, so the next part, it says add c to both sides. So what does that mean I have to do? All I have to do is x squared plus 6x. I don't know what c is, so I just put plus c equals negative 5 plus c. And I guess just to say, I don't know what c is yet. Or I haven't chose what c is yet, to be particular. Okay. All right. Our next step, this is the unique step to this situation, is to change c or plug in c as negative b over 2 squared. So we're going to use this equation, b over 2 squared. Okay. Now what is b? If you remember, b is the number in front of just the x. This would be a, this would be b, this would be c. Literally c, because we don't know what number we want to put in there yet. But what we're doing with completing the square is we're going to put a very particular number to do a very particular thing. And to find that very particular number, we use b over 2 squared. So b is 6 in this case. So I'm going to do, and I'll do it in this corner right here, 6 over 2 squared. 6 over 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So what does that mean? My 9 is now my c. Now I found it, I will substitute all my c's. So x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals negative 5 plus 9. The right side I could simplify a little bit, and I'll just simplify by, instead of rewriting everything. Negative 5 plus 9 happens to be positive 4. Okay, so you're looking at me like, well, I don't feel like I got any closer, but we're actually really close to the answer right now. Now, what's happening over here on the left is now we could factor this. But I'm telling you this, we purposely picked the C in order for what about to happen to always happen. But I'm going to do it the long way this time. And then the next question, I'll do it the quick way, okay? The long way is, let's factor out what multiplies to 9, what multiplies to C, which is 9, that adds to B, which is 6. Now, we purposely pick 9 for a reason, and this is the reason. 9 that adds up to 6 is 3 and 3. So my thing becomes, because 3 plus 3 equals 6, so my thing becomes x plus 3, x plus 3. This 3 should feel familiar. This 3 is b over 2. That 3 is b over 2. That's always going to happen, okay? That's always going to happen. And we're going to do that on purpose, all right? So let's continue. So this is x plus 3, x plus 3. So this x squared plus 6x plus 9 becomes x plus 3, x plus 3. That's where the x squared disappears to. That's where the 6x disappear to. And that's where the 9 disappears to. And this becomes, it's just 4 right now, okay? So at this moment, we're kind of like here, all right? Well, x plus 3 looks exactly the same. So I could rewrite that as x plus 3 squared equals 4. At this point, I hope the last chapter or the last section feels familiar or is now found useful. Wait a second. If this is squared on the left side and is covering the x and is in parentheses, I could square root both sides. So I could square root both sides. What that does is it eliminates the square and the square root. But here gets square rooted. Don't forget plus or minus, this is 4, so 2. Okay? This right here stays exactly the same. X plus 3 equals plus or minus 2. Now we're going to take the 3 and subtract 3 on both sides. I want to get rid of the 3. So x equals plus or minus 2 minus 3. But that's two different numbers, right? There's a positive 2 minus 3. And then there's the negative 2 over minus 3. And we want both answers. So 2 minus 3 happens to be negative 1. And negative 2 minus 3 equals negative 5. Where did we see these numbers before? Well, these numbers are here from our original answer, if I didn't rest my hand on them and erase them, is negative 5, negative 1. So they match the answer we found with factoring. Now you could be correct and say, Mr. Tobel, why do you complete the square when factoring was a lot easier? Like, look at how much work we did, Mr. Tobel. You're insane. Mr. Tobel, we can't have too much homework. This takes forever. I already hear you guys. I know who you're saying. I know what you're saying. But this method is important and I'll show you in the next example, because sometimes we can't factor it. So we need to find it in a different way. So I'm going to leave it like this. And then I would say pause if you need a picture of this. And I'm going to go to the next question, which is x squared plus ax minus 4. All right. So now this one, I'm going to do a little bit more faster and condense. And then we're going to do a bunch of practice in the Zoom. Okay. So first step, get x's by itself. X squared, so I'm going to plus 4 on both sides. So x squared plus 8x equals 4. And I'm going to show you a trick. You know the next step is going to be adding c. So just leave a little gap here, because step 2 is to add c on both sides. So just leave a little gap, and this will make your life a little easier. I'm showing you the faster, more straightforward way. The last one took so much longer because it's always going to look like that. Or I'm just explaining everything that's happening. All right, next part. We want to find what c is. So we use our simple equation, b over 2 squared. Now, b over 2 is 8 over 2. Because b is the number in front of just x to the 1 power. Just remember that. It's x to the 1 power. Not 1, please. Not 4. It's 8, okay? So divide it both sides. That's 4 squared. That's 16, okay? So right here, it's going to be x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 4 plus 16. Again, I'm doing it a little quicker. 4 plus 16, which is 20. Okay? This right here, I could factor it out and do it the long way. But you guys are smart, I'm smart, and we looked at the steps. It will become x plus or minus, depending on the situation, if it's a negative, x plus whatever b over 2 is. And b over 2 is 4. So it's going to be x plus 4 squared equals 20. So you could skip all the way to that. That saves us a lot of the space compared to the last question. Okay, so we got x plus 4 squared equals 20. We're going to square root both sides. Now 20 is not a clean square root. So what are we going to do there? Yeah, nothing. We're just going to leave it as an unclean square root. So square root 20. Save ourselves a little pressure. But I want x by itself. Remember, when I square root, I cross this out. So that's why it's just x plus 4. I want to get x by itself. So minus 4, minus 4. Your final answer is x equals plus or minus the square root of 20 minus 4. I'm going to check the textbook in a second. Give me a second. In the textbook, they leave it like this. They might also write it like this. They put the number in front. So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 20. Both are the same thing. Just remember the plus and minus should be in front of the root 20, not in the 4. Okay? But, yeah, this is the basics of it. Like I said, it definitely looks more complicated when I'm talking about what it means and what it stands for and what's actually happening. But in terms of the steps, it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to have a couple of problems for homework. Make sure to join the Zoom for that.